So, Karan, I was wondering if you could tell me about the relatively new supplement that you guys came out with called IGG. What does that stand for? What is it? Why should we take it? And one of my biggest questions is I feel like I'm always telling my readers, you have to take this supplement. It's awesome. And now we have one more, and I don't know how to handle that because there's a lot of good stuff out there and it's expensive, and people aren't,
Yeah.
going to be able to do all of it. So maybe is Just Thrive still the priority, and how do you explain that?
Yeah. So Just Thrive is foundational, right? That's the supplement that you need every day, the thing that really kind of keeps your system working the way it's supposed to work. Some of these other ones, you use them intermittently depending on what's going on with your system at that time. Is it beneficial to take the IgG all the time? Absolutely. It always helps. But if you can't afford to do that every day, then you could certainly focus in on it during certain times, and we'll talk about when that is. But let me tell you a little bit about the product itself. So IgG is an immunoglobulin. So in your body, there's many different types of immunoglobulins. There's IgG, IgM, IgA, IgE. IgE is the immunoglobulin that's associated with inflammatory responses that are correlated with allergy type of responses, right? So we'll put that aside. And that's released by eosinophils and cells that create an allergic response to things. IgA is it's called secretory IgA, which is in your saliva, it's in your gut lining, it's in your mucosa, it's your first line of defense for immunoglobulins. And again, I'll explain exactly what an immunoglobulin is. IgM is a shorter acting immunoglobulin, and IgG is your long acting immunoglobulin. So, what is an immunoglobulin in itself? Well,
It's a tongue twister, first of all.
it's definitely a tongue twister, yes, and it's a fun word to say, and it makes you sound smart. So immunoglobulins are produced by antibody-producing cells, so they are antibodies, right? And I think a lot of people have heard antibodies, and the word antibody comes from the idea is that it works against certain specific things. So you've got B cells as part of your immune system, and their whole job in large part is producing these antibodies against things. The antibodies are like little drones that float around in your immune system and throughout your body. In the case of IgA, they're floating around in your saliva and your mucosa, and the first line of defense where anything enters your body is going to come through. They're floating around and they're looking for targets to bind to. And when they bind to targets, they signal the rest of your immune system that, hey, I've got something here, come and remove it. And they also neutralize that target, right? So they neutralize whatever negative effect that target may have. Their targets can be lots of stuff. It can be viruses, it can be bacteria, it can be toxins, it can be environmental particles, it can be food. In the case of IgE, it'll bind to food antigens and create an inflammatory response, which is a non-favorable immunoglobulin response. So, but let's focus on the good stuff: the IgG, IgM, and IgA. So their job is to bind to invading particles, whether it's viruses, bacteria, or toxins, and neutralize them, and then also signal to the immune system that I found something here. I need you to remove it out of the system. And they work in different levels. So IgA is the most common that's in the secretory components of your body. So in your saliva, like I mentioned, in your mucosal lining, in your gut, in the mucosal lining beyond your skin, in your eyes, everywhere where things may enter your body, you've got IgA. The problem with IgA is it's not as specific. It's the first line of defense, so it's just kind of binding everything, right? It binds your own bacteria, it binds viruses, it binds everything, but your body has to produce lots and lots of it because it's non-specific, and it's just kind of trying to bind to everything it encounters. The IgM is a shorter acting specific antibody, meaning once your body encounters something and it's your immune system has been presented this new invader, then your immune system matures a B cell whose whole job is to produce antibodies against that one target, right? So this B cell exists to produce antibodies against that one target should you ever encounter that target again. So the first antibody it's going to produce are these IgMs. So these IgMs only last for about 2 weeks. They're there to mount a really strong defense against that new invader, neutralize it as much as possible, and remove it so it doesn't cause problems in the body. Then the second phase is the B cells will start producing IgG. IgG is also very specific to that one target, but the IgG has long-term memory. Those IgG will be circulating around your body for years, and in some cases for the rest of your life, looking for that same target again, so that should you ever encounter that target again, the IgG will immediately find it and bind to it. It'll signal to the B cell that makes the IgG that, hey, we need more of this IgG. It'll produce much more, and it'll neutralize the invading pathogen, and you'll never feel anything about it, right? So that's what IgG does. It's a really powerful neutralizing antibody that binds to toxins, it binds to viral particles, it binds to bacteria, and so on, and it brings down inflammatory responses when it does that. Remember, inflammatory response is the innate immune response in your body. That's the first line of defense in your body. It's the non-specific kind of blowtorch type of defense in the body. When you start getting IgG binding, that's the long-term memory, the specialized cells that are focused on that one target, and it also brings down inflammation because it tells the rest of the immune system, hey, I got this, I know exactly what this is, we have all the tools to fight it, we don't need the inflammatory response. So turn off the inflammatory response, I'm just gonna go neutralize these things specifically and get them out of the body, right? So hopefully that explanation made sense. So then they started using IgG therapy, and you can get IgG from other sources. In this case, it's from cows. It's bovine source, right? So cows are out there in the pasture. They are encountering all kinds of bacteria, all kinds of viruses, all kinds of parasites, environmental toxins, mold, all kinds of stuff. And then the cow's immune system is doing that. They're encountering things, they're mounting an immune response against it, then they develop IgG antibodies against those things as long-term protection for the cow. And as it turns out, you can pull out the IgG from the cow's serum, concentrate it, and then you've got this huge collection of drones, if you will, antibody drones that are specific to so many things that cause inflammation and damage to our own body. And so when you take it orally, all that immunoglobulin goes into your gut where 70% of your immune system is, and it lends a massive helping hand to your immune system to bring down the work that your immune system has to do, because now you've already got immunoglobulin G, that the long-term highly specific immunoglobulin to lots of stuff that your immune system is constantly encountering. Because remember, when you're immune, let's take target A, right? Let's take a mold toxin as an example. Let's say your body's never encountered that mold toxin before, and it enters in because of your home or your work or your car, wherever mold may be growing, or some food where you've got contaminated mold. That mold toxin enters your body and your body's never really seen it. The first thing that's going to try to attack it is your IgA. And it'll neutralize some of the mold, but remember, IgA is non-specific, so it just has to kind of accidentally come across it and bind it. Now, some of that mold will still get through, and it'll trigger an inflammatory response. That inflammatory response will turn on inflammatory cells that are going to come in, and you're going to get that IgE response first, because that's going to be the first line of defense. So now this mold toxin is going to make you feel itchy and sneezy and inflamed and really uncomfortable. You might even get a low-grade fever. Then as your body's trying to figure out what else to do with this, the B cells will finally start to mature and produce IgM against it. The IgM will start controlling the response and bring down the inflammatory part of the response. But remember, IgM is only short-acting, just 2 weeks. In order for your body to have the memory to never have to trigger the inflammatory response the next time it sees this mold, it has to have the IgG come up. Now, all of that can take several weeks. In some cases, 5-6 days. In some cases, it can be a few weeks, depending on what your constitution is like. And so your body goes through these cycles of inflammatory response and so on. But let's say you took the IgG, and the IgG already had antibodies against that mold, it would immediately neutralize it. Your body would never have to deal with it, right? So that's the idea behind the IgG, is that we've got this really powerful set of antibodies that are already designed to target all kinds of pathogens and molds and toxins and all that. We are taking it in. It works primarily in the gut, where all the immune tissue is, and it lends our immune system a helping hand, if you will, by dealing with lots of things that your immune system now doesn't necessarily have to deal with as readily. What got me really interested in this particular product was all their studies that they have on HIV. So HIV, I don't know if I've talked about this on your program before, but the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, had published studies showing that leaky gut is the biggest driver of mortality in HIV. Like many other viral infections, it can infect your gut, and it causes this massive inflammatory response in your gut lining. And that massive inflammatory response creates huge amounts of permeability, and then you get all these toxins that leak in, and those toxins create a really susceptible host to all the opportunistic infections that come as a result of HIV, like pneumonia or certain types of cancers like Kaposi sarcoma, and so on. So HIV, the part of how the virus works is it weakens your system, starting with creating really profound leaky gut, right? So this company that developed this product has done a couple of studies in HIV showing that even in HIV-infected patients, it can dramatically reduce the inflammatory response in the gut lining itself, thereby helping seal up the gut and reducing the translocation of toxins. It can also then support the proliferation of the parts of the immune system that are really important to deal with all of these inflammatory responses as well. So then they have studies on ulcerative colitis. They have other viral challenges where they can infect animals like mice with other viruses, not COVID-19, but other viruses, some similar viruses, other coronaviruses they have as well. And then when they deliver the IgG, it dramatically helps the immune system deal with those infections. And so that really impressed me with this ingredient and became a really important part of, again, lowering the toxic load, lowering the burden that our immune system has to deal with, and can be really powerful in that regard.
So are you and your family, are you guys taking this right now in addition to the Just Thrive every
So
day?
I take the IgG every day. I always have, ever since we came up with it, for a few reasons. One, because I before all of this, I flew a lot, right? So I travel almost every week. So I'm in airplanes and hotels and off my sleep cycle all the time, and so I put my body through a lot of stress. And I'm encountering a lot of things from all of the travel that I do. And so in order to support my system and provide my immune system a little help, I take a bunch of this IgG. I take typically about 4 capsules a day, so that's about 2 grams, which is a very good clinically relevant dose. Now in this time, because of all of this exposure, I am going a little bit higher than that. I'm taking anywhere from 6 to 8 capsules a day, and it dramatically improves lots of other things, even beyond just that pathogen fighting capability. We have lots of people in the doctor side of the world that report other biomarkers dramatically lowering, like things like their lipids, their stress hormone levels. Anxiety is a big one that we get a huge positive response on, because lots of anxiety is actually created and triggered by bacterial toxins that are produced in the gut. There are a number of bacteria like Campylobacter that can produce toxins that make you feel anxious and have panic attacks. We've had lots and lots of reports on mood effects, again, because so many toxins create mood disorders in people, create panic disorders and anxiety. And so when you start neutralizing lots of that stuff, you really start to feel a difference in your constitution. I feel like I sleep better if I take it at night before bed. Most of the times when I take it at night before bed, the next morning I have a much better bowel movement. So I'm pretty religious about that. I take the probiotic and the IgG are 2 things I typically don't forget throughout my day. Those are the 2 important things that I use in my system.
What about, would it have an effect on something like, a couple years ago, I had this out of nowhere, I had this terrible back pain. And the only thing that helped it was ice, because it was obviously some sort of inflammatory response in my back. I don't know where it came from or what happened, and it went away. I had it for a couple days off and on, and then it finally went away. And the ice was really the only thing that helped. And I'm wondering, what about like a short-term inflammatory response like that in our body? Would this help with that as well?
In tissue inflammation, we're not sure. We don't have any data on that, but We do in mold response, right? So if you feel like you've been exposed to mold toxin or some sort of toxin from food-borne illnesses, like we had an incident where one of our staff members, we went out to eat, and then all of a sudden she started to feel like really kind of lightheaded and panicked and sickened in the stomach to some degree because of something she felt she ate there at the restaurant. And so we gave her like 6 caps of IgG right away at the restaurant itself. Of course, we all always have supplements in our pockets and stuff. So everyone banded together and gave her as much of the IgG as we could. And she took it, and then within an hour or so, she felt way better, right? So that was an acute type of response. We've had lots of people that have acute exposure to mold. They stayed at a family's house or hotel or Airbnb where there was suspected mold, and then they feel the toxicity from the mold, right? You get the lightheadedness, the flushing, all kinds of stuff that occurs. We've used it acutely for those types of inflammatory responses as well. So in those kind of responses, yes. Depending on what was driving your tissue inflammation, maybe. If there was a bacterial toxin component to it, then maybe. But if it was more like a strain or injury, then it probably wouldn't. It doesn't have like a NSAID kind of anti-inflammatory effect, or like a fish oil kind of anti-inflammatory effect. It's more about neutralizing the targets that would drive inflammation.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, are there any other questions about that I should ask you that I haven't asked?
Some people ask me about there are people that get IV IgG therapy. That's actually a very successful therapy for certain types of autoimmune conditions and so on. They go and get regular IV IgG. They ask if this either A can replace that, or B, can I do both at the same time, right? Those are the common questions I get. Number one, it won't replace it because this IgG functions predominantly in the gut and the gut mucosa. So it won't necessarily get into your circulation. So it won't be the same as the IV IgG therapy that your doctor is doing. And with that in mind, then it helps answer the second question that you can do both at the same time because one doesn't really interfere with the other. Can you take too much of it? No, the medical food version of it that only is done through prescription is actually 5 grams a day. And that medical food is prescribed for gut infections. And that's called Enterogam. That you have to get through a pharmacy, through a doctor's prescription. This is the same exact ingredient in the prescription, but sold as a supplement at a slightly lower dose.
Wonderful. All right. You answered all my questions. Thank you so much, Karan.
Thank you.